They fly now? They fly now!
Welcome back. So we're hold on, damn it. And dude, I was rehearsing this over and over to make sure I don't mess up.
You suck!
Welcome back. We're your hosts Matt and Gio, and today we are reviewing Star Wars: Rise of Skywalker. Dun 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 dun. Oh yeah, that was a great opening sequence right there.
That was a very great opening sequence. I can't deny that. So yeah, Gio, I don't know about you, but I've got my whiskey and Coke here, full, ready to go.
Mine.
Awesome.
Yep.
So this movie was directed by J.J. Abrams.
J.J. Abrams has fixed America.
He also directed the first of the sequel Star Wars movies, The Rise of Skywalker. He's also directed all the newer Star Trek movies that have come out with Chris Evans and those guys. This movie was produced by Kathleen Kennedy, who also worked on the original Star Wars movies. And the music, of course, as with all the Star Wars movies, is by John Williams, who has, like, if you've ever watched a movie, you've heard his music. He did all the Star Wars music for all the Star Wars movies, all the Indiana Jones movies, Jurassic Park and The Lost World, the first 3 Harry Potter movies, Home Alone, E.T., Schindler's List. Like, he's done a lot of stuff.
You are such an overachiever.
Alright, and here are our core actors for the movie. We have Adam Driver, who plays Kylo Ren. Dang, this guy's in a lot of movies, but I just don't know any of them. Daisy Ridley, who plays Rey. John Boyega, who plays Finn. And Oscar Isaac, who plays Poe Dameron. We also have Carrie Fisher, of course, Princess Leia, or now it's General Leia. And then we also have Ian McDiarmid, who returns as his character as Emperor Palpatine. And all these are returning cast from the movies from Force Awakens as well as The Last Jedi.
All right, thank you, Gio, for going over those actors there for us. So now I'm going to go ahead and start talking about the actual movie. So in the opening crawl, like every Star Wars movie has, this is where we learn that the galaxy has started hearing Palpatine's voice again. The movie opens with Kylo Ren going to find Palpatine, and Palpatine there tells him to kill Rey. Back at the Resistance base, Rey has been Jedi training with Leia, and Finn and Poe return from a mission where they have received intel of Palpatine's return and a huge fleet on Exegol known as the Final Order. So, Rey, Finn, Poe, Chewie, and C-3PO all leave to go and try and find their way to Exegol. They arrive on the Midian system where they find the crash ship of Ochi, who is a Jedi hunter that Luke and Lando Calrissian had been trying to track down. On the ship, they find a dagger with Sith writing on it. While investigating the ship, Chewie ends up getting captured by the First Order, and thinking him dead, the group travels to the planet Kijimi, where they meet the droid smith Babu Frick, who forces C-3PO to translate the Sith language, but doing so erases C-3PO's memory. The translation sends them to a moon on the Endor system, but first they go to Kylo Ren's ship to get Chewie back. While on board, they learn that General Hux is actually the spy that gave them the intel that Palpatine had returned.
I'm the spy.
What? You?
We don't have much time.
I knew it! No, you did not.
Once they have Chewie and all his stuff, they escape the ship and head for the Endor moon. On the moon, they meet Janna, who, like Finn, is a former stormtrooper. They see the wreckage of the Death Star out in the ocean, and Rey goes out to it. On the Death Star, she encounters Kylo Ren, and they have a lightsaber battle. At this point, back on the Resistance base, Leia uses the Force to call out to Kylo, causing her death. This causes Kylo Ren to hesitate, and at this moment, Rey stabs him with his own lightsaber. Rey then Force heals him, though, before leaving in his ship, and after having a vision of his dad, Han Solo, Kylo Ren once again becomes Ben Solo. Rey then takes Kylo Ren's ship to where she trained with Luke, and there Luke's Force Ghost raises his old X-Wing out of the water and Rey flies it to Exegol. The Resistance fleet arrives shortly after her to take on the Final Order fleet while it is still in the process of launching. Ben also arrives there, somehow. Rey is eventually able to overpower Palpatine and defeat him once and for all, but it took everything she had, and she basically died after doing so. But Ben is able to force heal her, and as a result, he dies, but not before they share a kiss. The fleet is able to defeat the Final Order once Lando arrives with reinforcements, and at the end of the movie, Rey goes to Tatooine to leave Luke and Leia's lightsaber at Luke's old house in the desert, and she introduces herself to a local there as Rey Skywalker.
Who are you? Rey Skywalker.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Matt, for giving us a little synopsis of the movie.
Anytime.
I would like to go ahead and discuss a few points further deeper into the movie. One topic that we like to discuss about is basically on Palpatine's return. So my idea, like especially with the opening crawl, in the opening crawl, they basically acknowledge that Palpatine's return.
He's back.
Which, in my point of view on it, something that they kind of could have left out. They could have said something Dark Force in the opening sequence, just kind of hinting it. But even though we know, especially if you've seen the trailers and everything, we know. But like just kind of like have that extra mysterious to it, because there's some Dark Force in the air.
You feel it? There's something in the air.
Or something just like something that they didn't know about, because in this time frame, in this generation of this Star Wars here, a lot of them know about him, but they never felt that force or in that case. So they could have said something like a little bit deeper into it.
I remember when I went to see the movie in the theater, I was kind of surprised that they just like went ahead and said that in the opening crawl, because I thought that a big part of this movie was going to be about how he returned. Like I was kind of expecting, like, you know, the first half of the movie, the first act of the movie to be like, you know, like sort of how Palpatine came back. Maybe Kylo Ren somehow was able to bring him back, or, you know, something to that effect. I thought that's what we were going to be kind of seeing in the first part of the movie. But no, it's just like, oh, guess what? He's back, you know?
You're not dead. No.
I feel like just the way that they brought him back is what led to a lot of the criticisms that this movie has. Just, you know, oh, we're just supposed to, you know, like, you know, we start watching this movie and this guy that we like have literally not heard from since, you know, Star Wars Episode 6, and I don't know if they even mentioned his name in the previous movies, or in the previous sequel movies, I should say. They probably did at some point, but like he's just back all of a sudden. If the movie that came before this one had sort of set that up, then maybe it would have been more acceptable as a fan to see that just in the opening crawl. But there was nothing in the previous movies that, you know, set that up. And I just think that the way that they, you know, basically said, oh, by the way, he's back.
Oh, so that just happened.
Was just a strange way to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And then as we go on and we learn more about this Palpatine, that he basically is, I'm guessing he's a clone from what I kind of see in the movie. He's a clone.
So, yeah.
They didn't really say like he was a clone. No one really mentioned it, but like there was him, and then you see like others in that little crowd that he was with, and they all seem to be resembling him.
Yeah.
And then during that part, and then he also mentioned Snoke was a clone, and he made Snoke, so that basically is another can of worms there.
Yeah, we can't get into every can of worms that this movie brings up, or this video will be like 5 hours long.
And so, and then just the way they made him out to be, so he basically, they kind of made him the same type of person in Episode 6, and how he was a person that just influences and tries to get someone on their side. When they start bringing back his powers, I guess, when they start making full strength during that whole stealing life force, and we'll get to that part a little bit later on the video, but stealing that life force part, and he gets to full strength, just that ending that he had, I thought it was going to be a great ending. Like, oh, Kylo Ren and Rey are both going to fight him, and it's going to be a big battle. But then they're just so anticlimactic at that point. It was like the way I felt, and I didn't watch it in theaters. Maybe I have a different viewpoint if I did watch it in theaters, but I just watched it at home. And just during that part, it seemed like, okay, I have my powers, I'm full strength. Oh, and then it's like, I felt like the director was just like, oh, you know what? We got a time strain here. We got to end this quickly. Oh, okay. And then boom, he's gone. Bam! Episode 1, 2, and 3 kind of did it better in terms of like, okay, this is how powerful he was. He went toe to toe with Yoda at the end of episode 3. So you kind of know like, okay, he's one of the most powerful
and
Sith
he really
lords.
overpowered Yoda in their duel. Yeah.
And so, and in this one, it's just basically like, okay, you know what? We're just at full strength. Okay, that's it. We're done. It's like, and it just, I don't know. And of course, there's parts in this movie where I actually like, but that there's also parts that, like in this case, what we're speaking about.
Yeah, the whole Palpatine thing was just, it was awkward.
It is awkward.
If The Last Jedi had somehow hinted at his return or set it up in some way, I feel like this movie would have just worked so much better. Like, and we talked about this a little earlier. I feel like this could have been a really good movie, like almost just the way it was, if we had just had a little bit better setup in the previous movies. But
and that's probably due to the change of directors and one vision, the other vision in regarding to it. So that probably had a lot to do with it. It's just, if you can't just bring your vision from you had the first movie and then just completely get rid of one vision, just kind of like go off of what the other person's vision was in regarding to it. That's how I see it. It's like, okay, if they had this vision, let's try to go off of this one, not like completely like scrap that vision where like it's the second movie shouldn't be there.
So I mean, like at this point we've accepted, Palpatine's back. So like the first scene that we actually see Palpatine in, like basically the first scene of the movie, is where he's talking to Kylo Ren and he gives Kylo Ren the mission to kill Rey. But I mean, we know Kylo Ren doesn't want to do that. Like he I don't know if he likes Rey, but he at least respects her. He doesn't want to kill her. He wants her to join him. So at this point, I'm kind of like, I was trying to figure out, what is Palpatine trying to achieve in this movie? Like, cause he wants Kylo Ren to go kill Rey. He doesn't. And then once Rey comes to him, he's like, oh, I want you to strike me down, just how he told Luke, in, Return of the Jedi.
Take your Jedi weapon. Use it. I am unarmed. Strike me down with it. Give in to your anger.
I want you to strike me down. This movie has so many callbacks to Return of the Jedi, it's not even funny. But he tells Rey, strike me down. While they're watching the battle happen between her, resistance and his final order, just as, Luke was watching the battle between the rebellion and the Empire. Like it's a very similar scene. But whereas Luke actually does try to strike him down, Vader blocks him, Rey doesn't. When Ben gets there, I'm going to have to say Ben instead of Kylo Ren. When Ben gets there and he realizes that they are a dyad in the Force.
The life force of your bond. A dyad in the Force. A power like life itself.
That's when he starts to drain them of their life force to basically restore himself back to his former self. And like that confused me so much because like I don't know if that was like a split decision that he made when he realized, oh wait a minute, if I just take their life forces, I can be back to my former self. Like was that something that he like realized in that moment, or was that his plan all along, even when he was telling Kylo Ren to kill Rey, and then when he was telling Rey to strike him down? Like I don't know if his end goal was to pass along his Sithiness to Rey, or if it was to use Rey to get himself back into power.
Yeah, like while I was watching that, like I kind of got the same feeling like, okay, what was this whole plan? Because he's from what we've seen in past movies, he's a very smart person. He calculates everything. And I feel like this is one of those things in the movie, it didn't portray it that well if this was his plan the whole entire time. Because when it happened, it seemed like it was just like you were saying at the moment. It's like, okay, you know what? You guys are actually together, and I feel your two force together and how it's connected. So that's where like, okay, you know what? This is something that I could probably use on for my benefit at this moment. I feel like the whole entire time he was trying to have Rey, basically using Rey to be the next person at the throne. Even though there's different points in the movie, we'll get into what the whole Rey and Ben's connection during the movie. But
and real quick, I just want to add in something I completely forgot to mention in my synopsis. Rey is Palpatine's goddaughter or granddaughter.
Finally, somebody said it.
And so it just, yeah, like you're absolutely right. Just it didn't really. It seemed like they were just trying to add one nostalgia after one nostalgia, and then when that nostalgia doesn't connect, it's like, okay, we need to put some type of space in between. And that's what it felt like. It was just not rushed, because this is a decent amount of time of movie, so it wasn't, but it just felt like it's like, okay, you know what, we got to make a script, we got to do this. I want to add so much, but we just don't have the time frame to add these things. And so that's where it was coming through. And
yeah, and you know, so I feel like at the end of that, I kind of like you had mentioned, you know, at the end of Revenge of the Sith episode 3, Palpatine and Yoda have this big lightsaber battle, and they go like Palpatine really overpowers Yoda. And I feel like having something like that at the end of this movie, something between Palpatine and Rey, would have made it a lot better than, you know, what kind of came across as, you know, an easy defeat for Rey. And you know, that also would have gone to show how strong Rey has become, because she's probably the strongest Jedi we've ever seen. That's including obviously, you know, Anakin Skywalker, Yoda, Mace Windu. She's done things that we've never seen Jedi do before. Examples from this movie is when she stops that ship from taking off, just from using her force power. She's holding this ship back from taking off, and then she actually uses the Sith lightning. And like, I don't know if that Sith lightning is that dark side force stuff, that lightning.
The lightning portion, I believe that's dark side, or like more Sith oriented than Jedi orientated.
Because I've seen, like, obviously I've seen Yoda like catch it, but I've never seen him or any other Jedi like use it. That was the first time that we saw someone who wasn't a dark side force user. I don't want to say Sith, but a dark side force user use force lightning. You know, which I think just, you know, again goes to show how powerful she's become. And then you know, just the whole connection that she has with Kylo Ren, which, you know, we'll get into later. That's some pretty, what I feel like is advanced force stuff. She's able to heal people by using the force.
And good thing you mentioned that, because in the previous movie, in Revenge of the Sith, and I know that we're doing our best to not try to recall and trying to just move. Yeah, but because there's so many callbacks in regard to that part. And what's so interesting is that in Revenge of the Sith, when Anakin Skywalker had that meeting, or not meeting, that little one-on-one with Palpatine in that opera scene.
Yes.
Palpatine actually tells him
He could even keep the ones he cared about from dying.
He was using that to Anakin to save
Padme.
Thank you. To Padme. And so that was the main focal point there, where he was using that as a weakness for Anakin. And here, she actually uses that power. She brought Ben back to life. And so that's a very interesting callback there. I wish that she was taught to do this instead of like, oh, I can do this type of thing. And so if they, and I didn't mind in the bringing back Palpatine in the beginning and things in that part. If they would have brought him back, and if it was Rey that first saw him, and then he was the one that was training her, whether if it was her knowing it or not knowing it, either by the Force and teaching her that way, then that would have just brought a whole different aspect to this.
Oh yeah, like I remember when the trailer came out for this movie and we saw like Dark Rey in the trailer with the red lightsaber, and it was like, oh my god, she's gonna go dark, and then turns out it was just like a vision that she had in the movie. But like I feel like if Rey, like, I don't know, if they had somehow had Rey go to the dark side, even if it was just for a little bit, but then had somehow come to her senses, or even somehow had Ben Solo after he switched, sort of bring Rey back. Like I think that would have been so interesting, and I don't know if they would have been able to fit all that into a single movie, but I feel like Rey taking this journey from the light to the dark, being trained by Palpatine, and then being brought back to the light by Ben Solo, who has at this point come back to the light himself. Like that would have just been I feel like that would have been really, really neat to watch. Obviously that didn't happen, but I mean that doesn't make Rey's strength or Rey's power any less. She's super strong. She healed that serpent, she healed Kylo. She was able to basically come back from the dead after Kylo healed her. She was able to take on Palpatine. I know we were talking about how that was a really quick, scene, really, easy, so to speak. But, she was still able to do it. He was shooting his lightning at her, which was the power of all the Siths, apparently. And she was able to force it back onto him, and it was too much for him to handle.
Using all the Force from all the Jedis around her and things in that part. And she didn't really strike him down. She just basically reflected it, like kind of how Mace Windu did back in episode 2, 3. Clone Wars. Oh, no, yeah, episode 3.
Yeah.
So, episode 3. And so in regard to that part, just basically reflecting it and using that against him. So
yeah, and I feel like whereas Palpatine's return and all that was not handled, the best way that it could have been, I feel like Rey's power and her strength was actually handled pretty well, because from the first movie, The Force Awakens, the first movie that she appeared in, like she is like, it was already kind of shown in that movie how strong she is.
You will remove these restraints and leave this cell with the door open.
I will remove these restraints and leave the cell with the door open.
Yeah, like she is someone who's just like the Force is in her, and she is just naturally strong with it. And it was, the training that she got from Luke and The Last Jedi, and then the training that she got from Leia, in this movie, that sort of like, I guess, train her how to focus that strength and that power that she has.
And so I just wish that it would just kind of like taught to her, like just the Force lightning things in that part, because it took forever for Luke to even just use a Force to lift his X-wing out of the swamp. So I mean, here she is basically everything's coming to her naturally, and I just wish that it was more taught at taught that way, or we can see that teaching. I wouldn't mind that as well. And so, but yeah, like when she pulled that transport ship and just stopped it, I thought that was an awesome scene. I'll admit completely, I thought that was a really awesome scene. And then
that was an awesome scene.
It was just out of nowhere. You just see it stop, and then you see her, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's. And so I really enjoyed that. But then it kind of lost. To me, it lost it when all of a sudden Ben could do the same thing. Like all of a sudden he's pulling it, and I was like, if you just not really let her have that moment, but just focus that scene mainly on that, what she was doing, it's a lot more impactful. She can either try to bring it back, but she doesn't have enough strength to pull it back, and that's where the Force lightning came out. And so just have it that way instead of someone else doing the same force with her. So
yeah, well, I think a lot of that was also just to kind of show that Ben is her equal. And like we're getting into Rey and Ben, and we have a whole little segment planned for this. But
yeah.
I think that's what that whole thing was, to show that she's really strong, but guess what? So is Kylo at the time. So is Kylo Ren, and he is her equal. He is her counterpart on the dark side. And like I said, we'll get into that later. The movie ends, obviously with her taking the Luke and Leia's lightsabers back to Luke's old home on Tatooine. And then at the end of the movie, I'm not sure why she did this other than just to show the audience, but at the end of the movie, we see that she now has her own lightsaber, and it's yellow.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You had, when we were talking about this, you had looked up something, and one of the Jedi from the prequel trilogy had a yellow lightsaber.
But then we found out it wasn't yellow. I think it was orange.
It was orange.
Yeah. It was Plo Koon. It was his name. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and then in the Clone Wars series, the animated series, Ashka has it, I believe.
Ashoka, yeah. I've never watched it. I know she's one of the favorite characters from that show, but I've actually never watched it. But it says that the yellow lightsaber is most commonly seen in the Jedi Temple's guards' pikes on the Star Wars animated series, The Clone Wars. The Temple guards wield double-bladed yellow sabers, much like the dual-ended red weapon Darth Maul hefted before it was sliced in half. So yeah, these are like the guards of the Jedi Temple, basically, or who wield the yellow lightsabers, at least in the Clone Wars series. And that was an article by Looper that I was looking at. But I kind of wonder if that's meant as like a hint as far as where she's going, because I know that this is supposedly the end of the Skywalker saga. I know they're going to do more Star Wars movies and shows and stuff like that, but this is supposed to be the end of the Skywalker saga. But I don't know about you, but I feel like I want to see more of Rey. I don't know. I feel like I want to see what happens to her.
Well, see, that's what I kind of like figured. Like at the end, when she basically she's on Tatooine. No, was it Tatooine that she was on? And she pulled out the lightsaber. She basically buries Ben and Leia's lightsaber in the ground where they were, and then they came by and she said that I'm basically Rey Skywalker. I think she should have kept her name. Not saying anything bad, like, oh no, she don't have Skywalker's name or anything. Just have her name, and then move on to a different kind of like a saga from her side of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that way they can continue another Star Wars saga that will be somewhat similar, but just on its own. And then they can have more, because they could go so much with just her. And what if she is the next most powerful Skywalker? But of course, when there's always light, there's always going to be a dark side, always. So especially in past scripts we've seen, past Star Wars movies, Star Wars casting. So we can have someone that is just all of a sudden out of nowhere, another type of being is present. And so that can be another saga, but basically on Rey's part. You know what I mean? And so that would be a very interesting. And I'm pretty sure people will be okay because it's another saga. It's not something that like they're trying to rip off from their original movies. And that's where I kind of saw where the reviews were for the last movie and this movie. It was just because they're taking away too much and they weren't giving enough attention to one portion, but they make it her own saga. Then that's a different thing. And I'm pretty sure, or I would be interested in that anyway. So
yeah.
In this part of it, I kind of want to speak a little bit, just briefly on Finn's Force powers in regarding to how in the Force Awakens, you kind of see that he may or may not have Force powers. He always has this feeling in regarding, like when he first shot the gun from the spaceship while they were trying to get away, and then you see it again when he held the the lightsaber, which basically no one that is not a Jedi or trained to be a Jedi has that ability. So you always thought that he has that within him. And then the second movie didn't basically go into that at all. It kind of like just skipped entirely on it. Didn't really bring that up again. Didn't really see that. And then you had the third movie, which you see it again towards it, not like the beginning of the movie, but towards the end of the movie, where he says, "I just have a feeling," and I kind of just wanted them to go more in depth with it, bring something out of it. It just seems like they're just like, oh, well, here's something, and then that's basically it in regard to it. So I just wanted to just talk a little bit briefly on it, and I just wanted them to actually like, if they're going to go through with it, then actually go through with it. If not, then don't actually bring that part up. But yeah.
So this movie gives us a lot of things that it just kind of wants us to accept as, you know, reality. In the very first scene of the movie, not the very first scene, but the first scene that shows Finn and Poe and Chewie, we have Claude on the Millennium Falcon. And I want to see more of Claude. Also on the Millennium Falcon, they do what's called light speed skipping. And basically he's goes into light speed and then he comes out of light speed in some planet or asteroid field or someplace. He goes back into light speed and then out of light speed again. He goes in and out, still being chased by the same ships. You know, this is something that has never been really brought up in any other movies, any other Star Wars movies at least. And I'm trying to kind of figure out like why they thought they should show this to us other than just adding more excitement to that scene. Because it was definitely an exciting scene, but I'm just sort of like, why? Also, the dagger that they find on Ochi's ship, it lines perfectly with the wreckage of the Death Star. Now, apparently this dagger has been on this ship for, you know, a few years, you know, give or take. We're not really given a timeline, but it's easy to assume just by how decomposed Ochi's body is that this dagger has been on this ship and this ship has been crashed here for a while. So I find it difficult to believe that this dagger would just so perfectly line up with the wreckage of the Death Star, because this Death Star has also been in this ocean for a while now, you know, eroding, breaking down, you know, that sort of thing. But somehow this dagger just perfectly lines up with it. We're also introduced to these new devices called wayfinders, and wayfinders are apparently these devices that you can just plug into your ship, and they're basically a GPS to get you to Exegol. And my question is, why do these things even exist? Why did the Sith think this was a good idea? Because I would think that when you become a Sith, that's one of the things they teach you. Oh, okay, so our homeworld is Exegol. Here's how you get there. You know, like, why would they leave these devices out here so that anybody and their brother could find it and get to Exegol? Like, I just don't understand the logic behind the existence of these devices. And then the final thing that I want to figure out is, how did Ben even get to Exegol? Because after the lightsaber battle between Ben and Rey on the Endor moon, on the Death Star wreckage, Rey took his ship. Rey took his ship and she went to where she and Luke trained. And as far as I know, unless Ben borrowed a ship from one of the locals there, I don't know how he got off that moon and to Exegol.
Let's talk about Rose's lack of screen time in this movie. So in the previous movie, in Last Jedi, she was becoming more of more of an important cast. So she was shown more in regarding to it. So she had moments with her trip with Poe, and then also her relationship with Finn, especially when she saved Finn at the end of towards the end of the movie. And then in this movie, they basically just they made her into just not the same character as she was in The Last Jedi. They made her just more like a regular worker there, or just once in a while saying, "Oh, Finn." But during regarding to that part, so I thought they were going to explore her character more, kind of like putting her or her relationship with Finn a lot greater, and then they just kind of changed that up. Like, no, we're not going to have this. Finn's going to still try to go after Rey, and Rose is going to be in the background. So that part, I'm not sure why they just basically just kind of threw her in the shadows in regarding to that part.
During Kylo Ren and Rey's lightsaber duel on the Death Star wreckage, Leia at this point does some sort of force outreach to Kylo Ren, causing him to get distracted and get stabbed. This outreach causes Leia basically to die. And my question is, why now? Like, why did she choose this particular moment to do that? Did she know that this is when Kylo Ren is at his most vulnerable and might be the most, I guess, prone to reacting or maybe not answering, but at least being affected by this outreach that she did through the Force. Because I feel like there were a lot of good points in previous movies where she could have done this. When he killed Han Solo, I feel like he would have been at a very vulnerable spot then. Even when he, basically got beat up by Rey at the end of The Force Awakens, I feel like he would have been at a very vulnerable spot then. Leia was basically out of commission for the entire Last Jedi, so I can't really, say anything there. But I feel like, was it just as easy as her having this outreach to Kylo Ren to get him to turn back into Ben Solo? And did she choose this moment really just for advancing the plot? Because, I mean, it definitely advances the plot. Like, if she doesn't do that, Kylo Ren doesn't, turn around and help Rey, and Rey basically, if she doesn't die fighting off the Knights of Ren, then she, dies after defeating Palpatine. Leia was a very integral part of the Resistance. She was, General Leia Organa. And maybe it was just at this point that she kind of came to the conclusion that her role in this Resistance movement was done. And now it was okay for her to basically give her life to save her son from, falling further and further into the dark side and bring him back to light. That's really the most, as far as the actual plot is concerned, that's really the best reason that I can come up with as to why she would wait until this moment to try and bring Kylo back to the light.
So let's talk about some future movies that they can go ahead and take away from this movie. Kind of like spin-offs in that sense. So one of them is with basically Poe and Zori. So that relationship that they had in this movie is very mysterious. They've known each other for a while. They talk about different pastimes. And so that's something they can use as a spin-off later on and down the road as a more of exploring to that, their relationship. And even at the end of the movie, they kind of hinted a little bit, and then all of a sudden just kind of cut out there. But that's something, another one that seems like they can make a spin-off of or a future movie for is Jaina and Lando. And during the end, they basically talked about like, oh, well, Jaina never met her parents. She doesn't know who they are. And Lando says, okay, let's go find out. So that could be another adventurous type of spin-off movie just from this series. And it seems like that's what they were trying to hint as well, something that they can bring back from this movie in regarding to that part.
So something that kind of started in The Last Jedi, and really, I feel like they really did a good job of expanding on throughout that movie, and especially going into this movie, is the relationship between Rey and Kylo Ren. And I'm not just talking about like their personal relationship or romantic relationship, but their connection with each other through the Force. They'll have, conversations with each other from across the galaxy, through the Force, and they feel like they're sitting in the same room with each other. They can touch each other. They can see each other. They can even pass objects back and forth to each other. And I feel like that connection that they had is something that this movie actually did a really good job of building on, that was set up in The Last Jedi. I don't think it was really set up that much in The Force Awakens. I think it's something that really came to light in The First Jedi, and this movie just kind of took it and ran with it. And I thought that, a lot of that had to do with their so-called dyad in the Force, where, they are each other's equal, they are each other's counterparts on the dark side and on the light side.
And I kind of disagree in the part that it wasn't mentioned in the previous movies outside of Last Jedi. I think it was actually mentioned, well, not mentioned, but kind of brought up in The Force Awakens. There was portion of the movie, and I know that it was really, we found out in this movie, it was last movie it was Snoke, and in this movie it was Palpatine that kind of joined them together, but they didn't know that. And so in The Force Awakens, or in The Last Jedi, when they were able to speak together, but in The Force Awakens, there was moments where they would see each other, like when they caught Rey and then he was talking to Rey without his helmet on. There was that, just those small bits. So I think that they were trying to bring up some type of connection between Rey and Ben or Kylo Ren. I don't know if it worked out how they wanted to be towards the end of the movie, or towards the end of the saga. But it seemed like they always wanted to have that connection, especially at the end of the movie when they were fighting. Even at that moment, there was some type of connection between them two. Last Jedi just brought that to a whole different, like up a notch. And then you had kind of the Rise of Skywalker that kind of just fed off of that part. So I feel like that was always what was somehow like how it always going to be brought up, just because of that same connection in The Force Awakens. There was a connection without actually bringing a connection to it, without actually like blatantly saying, oh, we have a connection. Unlike The Last Jedi is where we say, oh, we have this connection. I don't know why, but we have this connection. And so that's how I felt.
Yeah, the Force Awakens definitely started their personal connection, their personal relationship that they had. But yeah, like you said, it wasn't really until the Last Jedi where we saw that connection extend, through the Force. So I think that connection that they had is just, is interesting. And then Kylo Ren first brought it up, and then Palpatine said it again when he started draining their life force, that they are a dyad in the Force. And I've kind of mentioned this, I think, a couple of times already in this video, but they are sort of the yin and yang to each other. And I'm not sure if when Kylo turned to the light, if it was just a matter of time before one of them died, because it's one of these things where
there can be no light without the dark.
And now that they're both light, there's not enough, there's like not enough room for the two of them, basically. And so it was either going to be, I don't know if that point, once Ben turned, if it was inevitable that, okay, you know what, now one of them is going to, die. One of them is going to not make it. Because in order for this dyad that they have between them to work, one has to be dark and one has to be light.
Well, when you're starting bringing up the dyad in the Force, for some reason, I don't know how that happened, but I kind of just, when they were mentioning that in the movie, I kind of just skimmed over that part. Like like watching it, I was like, oh, okay, another different type of Force. But when you brought it to my attention, I started thinking about more. I was like, okay, well, the death of Ben at the end made more sense. How he just basically replenished. So his Force probably went to all the other Jedis. He probably redeemed himself, like how he speaks, and of course a cameo by Han Solo was made by saying that you are no longer Kylo Ren, you are Ben Solo now. Yeah. So during that time, I think that's where he realized, and basically bringing out to the audience, that he is now no longer on the dark side of the Force, he is on the light side of the Force. So that kind of makes sense, since there's if Rey is the balance of this, then Kylo is not needed anymore. And so that's probably why he kind of disappeared, even though he was technically alive until he healed her, and then that's when he kind of disappeared. But in the same time when he disappeared, Leia disappeared too at the exact
they
same
both
time.
disappeared at the exact same time.
So, and that's probably a good understanding, especially like, okay, so they are the balance, and so since he's no longer needed, then that's where it ends. But like all balance, so you need a light side and dark side, so you can't have a light side. So that's where exploring future of like if there's going to be another Sith, or if there's going to be another dark side that presents itself future. So that would be interesting.
Yeah, it will be. And I'm thinking about how the Force relationship kind of expanded, because in The Last Jedi, they were able to talk to each other just through the Force. Mm-hmm. They were able to see each other. I don't remember if they were able to actually like touch hands, but in this movie, they were having lightsaber battles against each other through the Force. Like she was up on the ship, he was down on the planet, and they were still having a lightsaber duel. When he talked to her when she was on Kijimi, he took that, not Kijimi, Midian. He took that necklace that local had given her, and that's how he was able to like know where she was, because they had the necklace examined and they figured out she was on the Midian, and that was, you know, the planet where the festival is going on. You know, he took that necklace, and then at the end of the movie, when she went like this with a lightsaber and passed it to him, like I thought
they knew exactly.
I thought that was an awesome scene. Like, for me personally, I loved it. I was like, you know what, that's awesome. But I don't know. I guess a lot of people didn't like it. And I can see where they're coming from. They're like, oh, so, you know, we can, like, you know, ship things via the Force now. But, I mean, it's you know, it's been established that they have this connection, that they're able to contact each other directly through the Force. This movie, the Rise of Skywalker, has already established that they're able to pass objects, between each other. So I mean, that, like, her passing the lightsaber to him didn't really come out of the blue, because that had already been like established in a very casual way almost earlier in the movie.
And especially, so I think in the Last Jedi, and I know we keep referring back to the other movies, but in the Last Jedi, I think the part where Leia was on the same island as Luke Skywalker, and they were talking to each other. So yeah, when they were speaking to each other, they seemed to be in the same location at that time, because Luke saw both of them in the same hut. So if he saw both of them, that means they were at that same place at the same time. So, and I think they touched or something in that part.
Kylo
and so
was
it was
like
already
projecting himself there or something.
Yeah. So I mean, within that, even in the last movie, they kind of that connection just kind of like jumped a step with this movie, of course, with the fighting and everything in that part. But it's a good thing that you brought up the necklace, because one part of the movie that I didn't quite understand, when they were fighting, they knocked over the helmet of Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, and it was just a helmet. All that other pieces that broke during that part, that didn't come through. It was just a helmet. I don't understand like where that bridge begins and where it ends in regard to that part. You know what I mean? Because obviously they can't see each other's backgrounds, because it was obvious in previous movies too that they can't see where they are. But when something falls through, it was only that portion, when everything in the same vicinity didn't fall through. So that part I didn't really understand.
Yeah, I honestly didn't understand that part either, which is why I didn't use it as an example when I was talking about their Force connection. Because it entered my mind. I was like, well, I can't really explain that, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But no, I mean, like, that is something that I'm sort of curious about, because, like, they're fighting. She's in his quarters on the ship, and he's down on the planet where he thinks she is. And and I'd have to rewatch the movie to see who actually causes the helmet to fall. I don't know if he hit it with his lightsaber, or if she hit it with hers, or if she bumped into it, or what was it?
I think they both hit it at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it just has to do with what caused it, or who caused it to fall, or who caused it to shatter. But yeah, that one was kind of iffy to me, honestly. Like, obviously, it serves as a kind of a symbolic occurrence. You know, Darth Vader's helmet shattering. You know, this dark side of the Force image that Kylo Ren is trying to live up to, shattering, so that when he sees Rey the next time that he actually sees Rey on the Death Star wreckage, another, you know, broken symbol of the dark side.
Wow, that's deep.
Is when Kylo finally goes to the light. And I didn't even think of that symbolism until I started talking about it right now. But you've got Vader's helmet that shatters, and then the wrecked Death Star, and then he even shatters the Wayfinder. They're onto the Death Star. So like all these dark side symbolisms.
Oh, and he threw his lightsaber in the ocean.
Yeah.
After speaking with Han Solo.
So it's kind of I think it was more for like a symbolism aspect, and also to kind of move the plot along.
We obviously won't know, because Ben is no longer present in these movies anymore. But with their connection that they had and the way that they were able to transport different things, are they able to transport themselves through the Force?
I don't know. We never see them do that though, do we? Like
No.
we see. I mean,
there was that one portion of the last movie where they were in the same location, but he wasn't transported there. They were just present in the same location. But
yeah, it was more like he was projecting himself there. And it's sort of like how at the end of that same movie, Luke projects himself to Kylo, but that sort of takes everything out of him. So I don't know if they were just able to see each other through the Force, or we learned a lot more about the Force and what the Force is capable of in this trilogy than I think the prequel trilogy. Because I feel like the prequel trilogy didn't really add anything to the Force other than the midi-chlorians. And in this trilogy, we get like, oh, guess what? You can use the Force to communicate with each other. You can use the Force to fight with each other, send small objects to each other, project yourself across the galaxy. Like, there are so many applications of the Force that we learn about in this trilogy. And I think, for me, the most part, it works. Like, it works for me. It makes sense to me. Like, oh yeah, you know what? It makes sense that, the most powerful, strongest Jedi would be able to use the Force in such a way.
Yeah, and I like that too about the Force. And I know that's not a discussion that we're
we've kind of gone off topic a little bit, but I think it's neat to talk about.
But like the Force, but we've always known like that the Force is a strong thing, and it's everything that's around you, and in that part in the movie saga. But like you were saying in the initial part, they weren't really expanding on it. They were just like, okay, well, the only thing that Force brought in was creating Anakin, and that's the only part, and different levels. So like basically power levels is what they were trying to do. So the more you have, the stronger you are. But in this part, they were going beyond that. They were going beyond just like, oh, well, it's just this little part. They're actually saying this is what you can actually do with the Force. That's what makes it so powerful. And I like that a lot. It's basically what kind of hinted with the 4, 5, and 6 is the Force is a strong thing, and they've always mentioned it that is a strong thing, but we never really grasp how, like, what you can do, because we always see how strong the dark side of the Force is, basically everything you could do from there, but we never actually saw what the light side of the Force could do. And so this trilogy actually expands on that, seeing like, okay, this is what can be done with this part with someone that has that knowledge, has that experience and things.
Getting back on track.
Their relationship, I think, was one of the most interesting things about not just this movie, but this trilogy. And, eventually we'll do the other movies. I mean, it's inevitable. We'll do the other movies from this trilogy, the originals, the prequel. We'll get to them all eventually. But obviously this one, just came out on May the 4th and on digital, and we wanted to talk about it. So just kind of moving on here to our thoughts on the movie overall. What did you think about the movie as a whole? Like, what was your opinion on Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker?
I had mixed feelings, and I've said this to myself, and maybe it'll change, because I only saw it the first time. I didn't see it in theaters, I just saw it at home, but if I see it again, maybe I'll have different opinions on it, but right now, just mixed feelings. There's points in the movie where I thought was really good, really fantastic, the way it was portrayed, the way it was done, and then there were just other parts that, I'm not going to say bland, but just too abrupt. It just didn't, like, everything that they were trying to lead up to, it kind of either got scrapped or it got downgraded. And so that part, and then they're like, okay, well, let's bring more nostalgia into this movie because it's the last movie, so let's bring Lando into it, which I'm not saying that I didn't like Lando's character. I just didn't think that he was something, it's just like he was just brought in for nostalgia, just audience. So, and that's the part that kind of, just those little small snippets. And they were all throughout the whole entire movie with Sidious and how he was portrayed and things in that part. So just those small bits and pieces that kind of was more to the opposite side of like me liking it totally, completely. But like I said, there's points in the movies where I really enjoyed the movie by itself without including the trilogies in the past. It was a good movie on its own. And if they made Rey as her own character and not kind of like, oh, I'm taking on this name as a Skywalker name, just bring her in her journey, then I'll probably like it a lot more, because her character, even though a lot would say that she's overpowered and things in that part, and to some parts I can agree in regarding that, how overpowered she was, but she's only overpowered to us, I guess the fans, is because of how much we liked Leia, how much we liked Luke, how much we liked Anakin, and then when we find a character that wasn't related or even initially part of it, being that much overpowered than they are, without seeing her journey, without seeing her training that she went through, and then at the very end, it's like, oh, she's the granddaughter of Palpatine, that's why she's this powerful. It seems in that part. But if they made her own character, then I'm pretty sure more people will be able to be acceptable to it. But I liked it. I liked there's just small bits and pieces that I had mixed feelings on. But outside, I guess I'll say I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it too. It's not my favorite Star Wars movie by any stretch, but I kind of mentioned this earlier in the video, and when you and I talked earlier in the week, I mentioned it, that I feel like what really held this movie back was the lead up to it, because the Last Jedi really did not do anything to build up to what happened in this one. Just, Palpatine just sort of, appears. Like back in the original trilogy, you don't meet Palpatine until The Empire Strikes Back, but you hear them talk about the Emperor in the first Star Wars movie. You hear them talk about the Emperor. The Emperor's mentioned. You don't meet him, you don't hear him, but they talk about the Emperor. So I mean, there was. So then when you finally met Palpatine in The Empire Strikes Back, it's like, oh, okay, we're finally meeting the Emperor, and you're like anxious to meet this character. Whereas here, like, Palpatine isn't even a thought. He's just like, he died. Like, we're all sitting here like, oh yeah, Palpatine died. There's not even a hint that, oh, guess what? Palpatine might be out there somewhere. Sort of like you mentioned earlier, there's an evil presence out there somewhere, or a dark, a dark presence out there somewhere, a familiar dark presence, that people are feeling or hearing.
Just make it more mysterious, yeah.
Yeah, and then then it kind of lets us like think, oh, okay, well, what is this evil dark presence? And then when like, oh, guess what? It's Palpatine. We're like, what? Like, I feel like, and I know it was different directors who did the Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker, but just I feel like setting up Palpatine's return just better would have made all the difference for this movie. Because I mean, that was really what the movie was revolved around, was them trying to find and get to Exegol, where Palpatine was. Kind of like you said about Lando, his character really didn't do much in this movie. I mean, yeah, he told them on the planet at the festival about the Jedi Hunter that him and Luke were tracking down. He was the one who went and got all the reinforcements for the final battle. But like, that could have been anyone. That could have been any character who did that. It didn't have to be Lando. I don't know if this is to set up another movie or maybe a series with Lando and Janna, and if that's kind of what their purpose was for bringing Lando back, was to try and set up that future, relationship that these two characters might end up having. That's the only thing I can figure for his return. And then Claude, man, I want to see Claude again. Like he was in the movie for like 2 seconds, and then we never see him again. Like I want to see Claude. So I mean, the fact that I never saw Claude again, like, I feel like is what put the pin in the straw on the camel's back, or whatever you want to call it. I just wanted to see Claude flying an X-wing, man. At the end of that, at the end of the movie. But I mean, it was fine. Like I said, I feel like this movie's biggest problem was the lead up to it. And if they wanted to bring Palpatine back, I don't think it's something that they could. I don't think they were ever going to successfully do it in one movie, like do it completely in one movie, without at least some sort of setup or hinting that there's, you know, something big coming, you know, in the previous movie. Because once Snoke was killed, then it's Kylo's the main guy. Like, Kylo, as far as we know, is the biggest evil in the galaxy. Like that's how we ended The Last Jedi, with Kylo as being the big bad. But
there's always a bigger fish.
Yeah. And so who knows? Because I know that it was I believe it was supposed to be Colin Trevorrow, I believe the director's name, is supposed to be directing this one until he left, and so then that's when J.J. Abrams took over. And so who knows what his script was, what his ideas was. So it might have been like his own idea, or he may have brought some things from The Last Jedi into this. So that's something to guess as well in regard to. But what do you think about this movie as the viewers and stuff? Like, did you? Is there different points in movies that you disliked about the movie, or you liked about the movie, or what could be better? Please let us know down in the comments.
Yeah, definitely. And well, I mean, you've just watched, you know, our thoughts and opinions on Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Like you said, let us know in the comments what you thought about the movie. If there's something that we didn't talk about, I know there's a lot of things we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
But you know, if there's anything that you want to make a discussion on, you know, feel free down in the comments.
My name is Gio, and Matt, and we're your hosts. And please subscribe if you haven't, comment down below, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm the spy.
It's the motherfucking Eagle Double G.